Hello and welcome to the Offside Trap Football Podcast. How's it going, Rob? How are you?
Tom, great. Really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, Maradona, El Diego, legendary footballer of Argentina and Napoli. One of the greatest footballers of all time, no doubt, and obviously passed away there in November last year. Had numerous health scares over the last few years, heart attacks and bypasses and everything else. But we're going to focus on the player, the Maradona, rather than the Diego too much, as they say. We will touch on slightly his personal life, but mainly the extraordinary footballer that we all love.
Yeah, exactly. One of the greatest, if not the greatest footballer of all time. I think anyone that, any kid that when you first learn about football, the first words you learn are football and Maradona. They're the first two things,
Yeah.
He's synonymous with the world of football, and he's synonymous all over the world, really. He's a global superstar. And I would put him in there as like he was a teenage prodigy, child prodigy. And he's like Michael Jackson, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, all that sort of stuff, I would definitely put him in that category. And it is a celebration of his football career. We know his private life outside of football was very well documented. There is little parts later on in the episode that obviously parts of his private life are relevant to his football career as well. But we just predominantly, this is a celebration of, as I said, one of the greatest footballers to ever grace the game, if not the greatest.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everyone laughs, and especially me, I'm only kind of 26. So when I think of Maradona as a kid, he was this big fat, drug addict, ex-footballer. Everyone says he was brilliant, but when the Maradona that I would have seen as a kid was a mess, It's only as you get older and you watch and you read and you learn and you listen, you see that actually he was one of the greatest, if not the best footballer ever.
I couldn't agree more with you, Tom. Like, my memories, would you believe, as well, trying to get the age down here,
Nah, definitely not.
Were the exact same as yours. Like, I think USA 94 would have been my first thing of memory of football, and Maradona obviously synonymous with World Cups and stuff like that as well. Synonymous seems to be the word of the day now, doesn't it? I think that's
definitely for you anyway, yeah.
But basically, yeah, I would have seen, that type of Maradona as well. Then his career basically finished in 97 and was not playing in Europe or anything like that. So it was, I wouldn't have seen what I have seen in the couple of the things that we've watched now and all.
Of course.
Definitely my perception of Maradona has definitely changed totally as a footballer,
Me too. What we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and when we get into it, we'll start with his early club career all the way through right until he finished, and then we'll have a look at his international career separately. We'll be back to you in a moment. Okay, welcome back to the Offside Trap.
Just before we start, is that Man United jersey you have on there, is it?
Yeah, it's just in preparation for the match against Liverpool,
Oh, yeah.
Well, top of the league, did you not know that?
No, haven't been watching much football lately, would you believe?
Oh, well, I don't understand that from a Leeds point of view, but no, we're top of the league now, 3 points clear. We can actually afford a draw in Anfield. That's how good we are this season.
I'm trying to get me out. Do you like me out bookshelf there, do you now?
Yeah, how many of them do you own?
Yeah, all of them. They're all mine,
Sure, yeah.
I'm very well read. Sure, it must come across on the podcast very intelligent and all,
Yeah, no, it does all right. Yeah, that's why I have to edit it for about 2 hours every day. So, right, Maradona. Born, obviously, Villa Fiorito, just outside Buenos Aires in Argentina. Was an absolute slum, to say the least. He had no running water, no electricity. It really was one of the poorest areas and one of the poorest slums outside of Buenos Aires at the time. And I think most of the absolute world-class players that you come across in history came from poverty. It's the hard work and personality that gets there. But Maradona certainly did come. He didn't come from a great childhood, did he?
No, that was an absolute shanty town, the worst of the worst, one of the worst and poorest areas in Argentina, just outside Buenos Aires. And it seemed like that he had a close knit family, though. I will say that, regardless of his surroundings, that he always had his mum and dad right up until the end, which is a massive thing. He probably would have told you he wouldn't have had, like, family wise, not a bad childhood. He had 4 sisters. He actually had 2 brothers, would you believe, and they both played professional football. Obviously, didn't hit the heights that Maradona did, but
Yeah, certainly.
Maradona's a once in a generation. Do you know what I mean? So a phenomenal in
Definitely.
my eyes.
When he was just a kid, they had seen the talent from a very early age, hadn't they?
Yeah, big time. Like, he played for his local club, was Estrella Rocco. Now, Spanish is on point as well there. Been doing a few Spanish lessons for this one, pronunciations.
Be the judge of that.
Yeah. And basically, when he was 8, Argentina's juniors, their junior team, or a scout from them, spotted him. And I think you have a nice little story there about that, don't you, Tom?
Yeah, so when he went for one of the trials or one of his first training sessions, when they had agreed for him to come up and take a look at him, the coach was overseeing the training session, and one of the head gaffers, we would say, came across and said, there's no way that's a child. That has to be a dwarf. A child couldn't have that vision and that technique at such a young age. That we have to check his passports or birth certificates or anything that we can to ensure that he is actually who he's claiming he is. And obviously, once they checked that he was of that age, as you said yourself, they focused on him. They knew that they had a gem.
Yeah, big time. So basically, as the story goes, he actually signed, the youth team are actually called Los Chipelitos. Told you, they're just firing these out, and that was the youth team of Argentina's juniors. So he would have played for them. They're actually, that translates as the little onions, so the little onions. And basically, he was played there. And when he was actually, a little interesting story, in Argentina, people really started to get to know him because for the fans, he was a ball boy. And halftime, he used to showcase all his skills and all his wizardry, as they say. And that's how people really started to get to know him. So people had, in the football world, people had heard about this little kid that's unbelievable. He's the next big thing, But then outside of that, in Argentina, people that weren't really into football, not many of them, I wouldn't say, in Argentina, they're very passionate about their football over there, would have got to know him because he used to do all the skills at half time for Argentina's juniors. So basically then he signed his first professional contract for them when he was 15. And had a very successful time there, didn't he?
I think he was there for about 5 or 6 seasons, playing with Argentina's juniors. He scored well over 100 goals in something like only 180 games. So he was a very, very prolific player.
Wikipedia have a bit, they say later on down, so it's 115 or 116 in 166 games for them, Now, honours-wise, he didn't win anything, but on a personal level, this put him on the platform to greatness.
Exactly. It's where he kind of learned his trade, didn't he? He was by far head and shoulders the best player, but he really grafted, and that's where he started to become an unbelievable player. Funnily enough, in a story that I actually found it hard to believe, they had agreed a deal for him to sign for Sunderland in England. That he wanted to go. He knew obviously that Sunderland were in a fantastic team, but it was definitely a stepping stone. He knew, right, get myself into England, maybe then get a move into the big leagues in Europe, because in the 70s in England, there would have only been probably 1 or 2 really top class teams, where in Italy maybe you would have had 3 or 4. Germany would have been quality at the time as well, and in Munich, Ajax would have been up there as well. So there was a few teams that he had his eye on. But anyway, Sunderland was who came calling. But the military stopped the move. So at the time in Argentina, there would have been a military government in place, and they put him on a list, the untransferables list. Now, my Spanish isn't quite good, so I'm not even going to try and pronounce how it was the way they did.
Go on, for the crack.
But it was the untransferables list. And basically him plus maybe 4 or 5 other of Argentina's top players were put on it. And a direct quote from Maradona, which was in all of the media at the time, if they don't send me to Sunderland, I'll retire. And this was only very, very early on in his career. You're talking maybe he was still even a teenager, 18, 19, 20, somewhere around then. Yeah. Ultimately, the move collapsed. He didn't retire, as we know, and he carried on plugging away with Argentinos Juniors. But yeah, imagine Maradona for Sunderland.
Oh, mad. And I've no doubt when we touch on later on in the next few minutes of who we did sign for, they would have won the league, whatever league they were playing in. I've no doubt about that.
Absolutely. Well, what we'll do is we'll take a short break then. When we come back, we'll jump into his first major move in football and when he went to Boca Juniors. So we'll be back to you in a moment. Okay, welcome back to the Offside Trap podcast. So as we've discussed already, Maradona came from very humble beginnings, a very tough upbringing in Argentina, made his way up through Argentinos Juniors, scoring numerous goals, very, very prolific career at the minute. Had initially started to break through to the national team at this stage, which we'll touch on later, and then got his move that he had wanted. In 1982, he signed for Boca Juniors.
Yes, exactly. And as I was saying, Argentina, he was already from Argentinos Juniors. In Argentina, he was starting to become a household name, you know. And obviously, I'd say it was starting to ring around Europe as well. But he signed for Boca Juniors. It was actually for $4 million, they said. I don't know what that equated to back in the day. And that would have been a big money move at that time, especially in Argentina, you know. So, incidentally, he only played a season there. He was always, as we'll go touch on as well later on in the podcast, he was always very outspoken. Didn't have a great relationship with anyone hierarchies. Maybe the best one he had was when he went to Napoli, you know, with president there. But he always spoke his mind and stood up for his fellow players as a trait that I was getting from couple of the things that we watched, Tom, you know.
Yeah. He actually had 2 seasons at Boca, just to jump in there with you. They had 2 seasons of Boca Juniors.
Are you sure?
Yeah, 82 to 83 and then 84. 2 seasons.
I have to check that.
You didn't do much reading then, did you?
I think he only went, he's 81, 82 at Boca, Tom, I think. You'll have to check out.
And 82, we'll check it now. In the next break now, I'm gonna have to whip you now in the next break. I'm gonna jump in.
I was up all night doing this now.
Go on, sure.
He only had one, and he won the Primera title anyway.
He did.
That's
he won the league.
Something that he had. So, and he actually scored against River Plate. Now, I don't even know whether to bring it in on this now after that last bit, but you had a story there as well, didn't you? That he was River Plate were mad to actually sign him, weren't they? I think.
Yeah. So at the time in Argentina, you would have had Boca Juniors and River Plate. Would have been 2 of the bigger teams that he would have wanted to play for. But obviously, Boca Juniors, as people will know, they were known as the slum team. They signed the real working class players from the very rough areas. And when Boca Juniors came in for him, he had absolutely no hesitation in signing for them because of obviously they were his team. River Plate never wanted players from, especially Villa Fiorito, from that area in Argentina. They were looked down on. They were, when you think of Argentina at that time, would have been a poor country. They thought Villa Fiorito was even worse again. So they didn't want him at all. But ultimately, he went to Boca Juniors, and as we said, he became a world-class player at Boca. won the league, as we said. He was only there. Look, we look into it. It was only a year or two he was there. That's all. And ultimately, he started to become the Maradona that we all know.
Yeah, 100%. And as I said, there was never any doubt that he wanted to sign for Boca Juniors. And when we go on, it seems to be a trait that obviously he came from poverty, and in the eyes of people, rightly or wrongly, some of the clubs he signed for were looked at upon that way, and it's no coincidence that they're the clubs he signed for, I think,
Yeah.
He was always about the underdog and to fight and to scrap and to, everything like that. It epitomises his character, certainly as a footballer, I think, and his
Absolutely.
actions.
Absolutely. And actually, I take it back. It was only one season. Oh, yeah, I was thinking of Barcelona, believe it or not, that he was there for 2 years. Sorry, that was my mistake. And it was 81.
No problem. I'll let you away with it, I
I
had insomnia last night, so I was thinking I might have, myself. But,
I was thinking of Boca and Barca. That's where I was getting mixed up. But you're right. He won the league in the one season that he was there. But obviously he didn't last very long there because, well, as we know, one of the biggest clubs in history of football came knocking, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. So he moved to Barcelona then for a record transfer fee. World record transfer fee at the time, wasn't it? 5 million?
It was 5 million. So as we said, the $4 million doesn't equate to the same, obviously, of the currency at the time in Europe. But yeah, 5 million was a world record fee, and he went and he was put on a pedestal immediately.
Yeah, big time. And this is when I think Europe and the whole world knew exactly who Diego Maradona was, The footballing world was on notice already, and then he signs for Barca. Again, another club that, they're from Catalan, the mainland of Spain, would look on them quite different,
Absolutely.
maybe look down on them a little bit. You've got Real Madrid, who are the royal, the royal family are big into Real Madrid, and Real is royal. Spanish.
Exactly.
Could stand to be corrected on that. But and basically, signing for Barcelona, his time at Barcelona is seen by most as a bit of a failure. Not in my eyes. I think I would say more of a damp squib. He won the Copa del Rey there with them. He actually beat Real Madrid in the final of that Copa del Rey.
Yeah.
And basically, he had got sick there. He again, not a great relationship with the hierarchy at Barcelona for whatever reason. And he got sick. He got a bout of hepatitis and then got a really bad injury. He broke his ankle. But a lovely story, I have to say, is a bit of a fact as well, that he played Real Madrid in a game at the Bernabeu. And basically, what he did was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable goal. And he rounded the keeper. Keeper's name is actually Augustin, probably irrelevant to this. And a player, I can't remember his name now at the moment, slid in, and Maradona went to shoot through a dummy. Your man slid in and went into the post, and Maradona knocked the ball into the goal. Why this is so unique and special, he scored loads of goals like that, so people are probably like, yeah, whatever. But the fans in the Bernabeu, everyone who knows football, the hatred between Barcelona and Real Madrid runs deep. There's a big passion there. And the Real Madrid fans actually started waving white flags, handkerchiefs they wear. You call it waving the white flags, and actually applauded them. It was the first time ever any Barcelona player had ever been applauded at the Bernabeu. Unbelievable thing.
And I would say there was few and far between since as well, I imagine, anyone being applauded.
Yeah, so incidentally then, these two lads aren't bad either now, 2005, Ronaldinho got a standing ovation again, same thing for a performance he put in, and Iniesta in 2015. I think Iniesta's was a little bit of a thank you for the World Cup, scoring the goal, the winner. The whole of Spain fell in love with Iniesta then, regardless of whether he was Catalan, Basque, or any of that, or if he was from the mainland of Spain. So that's a nice story, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just shows, and at this stage, when you look back on Maradona's career, you wouldn't have said that he was at the peak of his power yet. Certainly not. And he was getting this sort of reception already at the Bernabeu. It just goes to show how loved of a footballer he was already. But he did relatively well at Barcelona.
He did.
58, 58 appearances, 38 goals.
Yeah, that's in
Which is
anybody's book. That's
1 and 2. Just over 1 and 2.
In 2 seasons. And basically, as I said, it was hampered by a really bad injury. They thought it could be career threatening.
It was.
He broke his ankle.
Yeah.
In a game actually against Athletic Bilbao, and basically this Bilbao team actually were champions at the time. Believe it or not, it was Javier Clemente's legendary Bilbao team, and they were a really good side, but they were also really tough. And Barcelona are actually winning the game 4-0. And Maradona, obviously, as he always was in most games, was very influential. He had set up the latest goal, and it actually says it was a goal too many, 4-0. So basically, this chap, I hope we get this pronunciation right. I'm calling him this name anyway. It's mad spelling, but Goycochea was a centre half for Bilbao, hard man. And he basically said enough is enough. An absolute horrendous tackle. If anyone wants to put it into YouTube and look at it.
It's terrible.
And broke his ankle. He was known as the Butcher of Bilbao. That was his nickname. So,
that tells you all you need to know, doesn't it?
Yeah,
as I said, he was relatively successful at Barca as well. He won the Copa del Rey in the Super Cup in his first season, along with then kind of a regional kind of trophy within Spain that wasn't very sought after, but they didn't really count as a treble. But the Spanish Super Cup and the Copa del Rey are obviously massive trophies within Spain and Barcelona, obviously. But he never settled. He never really settled in Barcelona. The lifestyle had a lot to do with it. This, as we touched on already, obviously the Spanish have a hatred, if you want to call it that, for Argentinians. They do look down on them as, second class or third class citizens. They don't see them as their equals. And Maradona did a lot to change that now, we will say, but ultimately he left Barcelona.
Just before you go there, Tom, on that, because it is interesting, the Basques also looked at them the same, and they were totally pissed off that they were being beaten 4-0, and they actually considered him a wop, I think it's called, or a guap, whatever they use. The lowest form of person in Spain, I think.
Yeah, it's horrendous.
And basically, they were pissed off that he was doing this to them, and they wanted to make sure. So why he left, they played at the Copa del Rey final, actually. So we got to another Copa del Rey final with them, and it was against Bilbao. They're actually beaten 1-0.
They were beaten,
and again, another fella, wasn't Goycochea this time. Goycochea actually minced them in the first few minutes again, and he was getting kicked pillar to post, That was always the way.
Gary Lineker actually said in a documentary there not too long ago that people underestimate how physical Spain was in the 80s. It was absolutely, they kicked lumps out of each other up and down the pitch. It wasn't as we think of Spain now. It was extremely physical, and Lineker, obviously being with Barcelona, knew that, but he said it was so physical. Yeah,
and basically people always say he never complained, and he was fouled the most horrendous tackles. You know what I mean? If you watch that game as well, it's disgusting. Never get away with it now, obviously. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what I'm mentioning in it is a massive row broke out. He actually headbutted your man that tackled him. He had obviously just lost it and had enough. It wasn't really the tackles now, that must be known. It was a racist comment that was made, a derogatory comment, very xenophobic comment towards him, and it obviously triggered something inside him. He headbutted your man, he elbowed some other fella, and he actually kneed some other bloke in the face. And it incited a massive riot. Fans were actually so pissed off that both sets of fans, I think, were throwing stuff at coaching staff and players. It was absolute madness, and that kind of was the catalyst for him to be moved along,
exactly,
of Barcelona.
Which was probably the best thing that ever happened to him, because ultimately we see in Diego, as he then became when he went to Napoli, which we're going to take a short break in a moment and we'll talk about it. But we had seen Maradona up to this point. Now we get to see the Diego as well. But we'll take a short break and we'll be back in a moment. Okay, welcome back to the Offside Trap podcast. So Maradona has just signed for Napoli, which is one of the most surprising moves in the history of football, in my opinion. Napoli were not a big team at all in Italy at the time, nor were they a big team in football standing in general. But nonetheless, he's gone to Napoli.
Yeah, and as I said, basically we were chatting just before we came on. If I can put it into modern day terms, just for a quick bit, basically it's the equivalent, and this is no exaggeration in my eyes, of Burnley winning the league.
Yeah.
The Napoli, the seasons before he joined, the 2 seasons, the 16 teams in the Italian league at the time in Serie A, and basically they had finished 10th and 11th, which you'd say mid-table, but with 16 teams in the league, it wasn't, and it was actually very close. The first season they stayed up by 2 points and avoided relegation, and the second season they stayed up by a point. These are the 2 seasons before he came.
This
So
is
then he
82 and
arrived.
83. This is the 2 years he was at Barcelona. They were obviously just had avoided relegation those 2 years, and then he signed in 84.
Exactly. And basically 84, 85 was his first season. And, you know, one thing I'll always take from it is when he's getting interviewed after games and all, they're still brutal, you know. But he's obviously the star man. Yeah.
He didn't have that much of an influence straight away.
Yeah, no, but he really enjoyed his football. He loved football. And any time he was so upbeat, I believe we will get there. Mad mentality to have. Never got annoyed that the other players went up to his level. Just a unique kind of thing, I really thought. Because you see players now and they get frustrated, you know, and they try and get in the back. It was a mad thing. I've never seen anything like it, really. But incidentally, a very good story, which actually ties in with a lot of stuff about Maradona, is that 84-85 season, February 24th, 1985, they play Lazio. And basically, Maradona gets a hat-trick, okay? Right, you know, nothing unusual there. But his first shot on goal in that game is actually a handball, okay? And he actually scores, right? And he obviously gets caught. They know he's handled it. It's a bit obvious, although it's well disguised, right? And why I'm saying this is interesting, obviously the handballs are synonymous as well with Maradona. There's a couple of more stories that we have later down the line about Maradona and handballs, as we all know. But basically, he scores a hat-trick in that game. And for anyone that's viewing, please go onto YouTube and watch that game. The 3 goals he gets are unbelievable. He actually scores his 3rd goal, his hat-trick, from a corner. So it's absolutely mental. When you say he was a one-man band, he basically nearly was. And he's probably doing a bit of an injustice to some of the lads out there, because they did obviously have some good players, you know. But he really did epitomise them at the time. I think the best thing to do is an example of how big of an impact he had. As I said, they struggled to nearly relegate the 2 seasons before he came. They came 8th, then they came 3rd, and then they won the league in 87. So to give you kind of an insight into how strong the Italian league was at the time, that's a team from the south had never won the Scudetto. Basically, it was dominated by the north. You had your Inter Milan, AC Milan, Juventus. The league at the time was seen as so strong, and the best players in the world wanted to play in the league. You have Michel Platini. We all know about him, one of the greatest players ever. He played for Juventus. Michael Laudrup played in 87 as well for Juventus. They were top players at the time.
They're household names, aren't they?
Yeah, you had an AC Milan team managed by Fabio Capello. You had Paolo Maldini, Franco Baresi, and Daniele Massaro, were three legends of Italian football. Yeah. Maldini and Baresi are in the greatest players ever category. And Inter Milan, incidentally, our friend Trapattoni was the manager at the time. And they had some great players as well. Daniel Passarella, who won the World Cup in '78 for Argentina. A few others like that. I actually, if I can remember correctly, I think they had Karl-Heinz Rummenigge as well, playing for Inter Milan. And Marco Tardelli, I think, as well. Now, I might be getting my teams confused on that one, but
all of those players at the time were top players in Italy with the top teams in Italy.
So it just goes to show that achievement. They actually did the double that year. They won the Coppa Italia as well in '87. I just think it's an absolute phenomenal achievement.
It's some rise. I mean, as you say, from relegation or near relegation for 2 seasons, 3 years later to be winning the double. You know, that, and to say, without disrespectful to the other players on the Napoli team, it was one man who did that. They didn't, you know, for every Cruyff, you hear, like, say, a Naiskens. With a Messi, you hear a Xavi or an Iniesta, a Ronaldo and a Rooney, you know, Gerrard and a Torres for all their league medals. But then you get on to Napoli, and it's Maradona. Now, as I said, I'm sure Napoli had other good players at the time, none on the level of him, none even really on a world-class level, household names, nothing. It was just Maradona.
Look, and I think it's important to note that he did all this playing as an attacking midfielder. Like, he probably created the number 10 role. Do you know what I mean? So all these goals and all, like his goals for Napoli, 115 goals altogether for Napoli. He was the all-time leading scorer right up until 2017. It is actually Marek Hamsik now, would you believe?
Yeah. Another number 10.
Yeah, exactly. But what he did for Napoli as a football team was absolutely amazing. We're not going to touch too much on what he did for them as a people or whatever, you know what I mean? That's kind of for another kind of podcast, I think, isn't it? Like,
I mean, even if you touch on it briefly, as I said, there's the religion of Maradona in Argentina. They've adopted that in Naples. He's the king of Naples. That's his nickname there. He brought absolute joy to a place where, as we said, near relegation a couple of years before. When he arrived at Napoli, and this is relevant later on in the podcast, when he arrived in Napoli, he made them comments. You know, local politicians in Italy and in Napoli, as even up to current day, have always been known as they failed to keep their promises, and they were liars and they were corrupt and everything. When Maradona arrived, he said, you know, I'm going to win you a championship. He says, I'm the one that's going to bring redemption. He says, I'm the one that's going to keep my promise. And he did. Not only did they win the league in '87, and I believe it was '90 as well, they also won the UEFA Cup. And I'm just going to show a short video here of the warm-up in the semi-final of the UEFA Cup. As we said, touching on it, Napoli had never been in this situation before. The town of Naples had never been in this situation before. You're talking about, it's not the European Cup, it's the UEFA Cup, but it's a semi-final. Probably the biggest game of their entire careers, most of these players. At this stage, Maradona had obviously won the World Cup in '86, which we'll touch on in a moment. But he had never really been at this stage in terms of European competition. And we're going to show the video of him warming up. And I have to say, you think this is a pre-season friendly, the way he's warming up. It's absolutely incredible. But
just before you play the video, can I just say, actually, it is actually important what you touched on there, that, again, Napoli was seen as peasants, the worst type of people. The city was in bits. And he was actually, when he signed, 75,000 fans turned up to the stadium. They've actually renamed their stadium now, actually.
The Maradona Stadium.
After him. And basically, as you said, broken promises, all this. And they were looked down on. There's a lot of racism towards them in Italy.
Definitely.
Big time. And he was seen as the saviour. He was actually seen as the saviour. They said, we don't care if we've no mayor, we live in shitholes, all this sort of thing. Maradona's going to save us. And he did, effectively. It was mad.
He did. The town absolutely blew up when he came. And as I said, I'm going to show this video. This just epitomizes just a very small snippet. It's 2 minutes of what Maradona is all about. This is amazing. Watch this video. Hold on there for a moment. There you have it. Maradona. What an absolute legend.
Unbelievable. Like, before the UEFA Cup final, which the UEFA Cup would have been, or semi-final, sorry, would have been, as you said, a lot more prestigious than it is now.
Definitely.
They would have finished second. So, and just finishing off, they came second then the next 2 seasons. That's why they were in the UEFA Cup for that.
Yeah.
And it kind of really cemented them then as, a top force in Italian football, which was mad.
Definitely.
Because again, as I said, there wasn't many players. There's a couple, that were decent. Obviously, they were not going to win the league with just,
one decent
Maradona
player and 10 shit players. But yeah, Maradona was the main force and an absolute monster of Italian football at that time, and was certainly from maybe 86 onwards. He was the best player in the world.
Right, head and shoulders.
Yeah, right up until 90, which obviously there's a massive issue then at Napoli, which ties into the international career as well. And it's when he obviously tests positive for drugs at that moment.
Yeah.
And
finishing up, he actually wins the Scudetto again in 90 with Napoli.
90, yeah. Really, that was the end of his career, that league win.
Yeah.
He goes off to the World Cup that summer, and obviously then we know what happens.
Exactly.
But ultimately, look, that is Maradona in a nutshell. We're not going to touch on anything further in the club career because it's not a true reflection of who he was. He became obviously piled on the weight. He was banned for several months and even probably the guts of 2 years at one stage. Ultimately, his club career just went down the drain then at that point, didn't it?
It did, and as we said, it's a celebration of his career. We want to remember him as the real player that he was and that everyone should remember him as,
Exactly. Like we thought we could sit here all day. You could actually make a podcast specifically about the downfall of Maradona. This is not this podcast. This is about celebration of the footballer that's Maradona. You could get into his ties with the mafia. You could get into the fake bladder for doping and everything like that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely bizarre. And to be honest with you could write a book on the downfall of Maradona. This is about the footballer that we all love. But we'll take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into his national career from the very beginning. Be back to you in a moment. Okay, welcome back to the Offside Trap podcast. So, as we've said, Maradona obviously was an absolute force in his club career, especially when he went to Napoli. And what we're going to touch on now is obviously his national career, which started at the age of 17, while he was still playing for Argentinos Juniors. He went into the national squad and was obviously one of the best up-and-coming players at that time. As we touched on in his club career, he was starting to find his feet at Argentinos Juniors. The coaches there at the time just couldn't believe that this guy was actually, he wasn't a dwarf, that he was a child, always small in stature, everything like that. But in 1977, he was 17, as we said, he went on to the national squad. He was tipped to be one of the best players coming through at that time at his age for the national squad. And the 1978 World Cup was coming up. At this moment in time for Maradona, he really was struggling to get into the national team because he was one of a number of good young players. There was a lot of the media scrutiny at the time that was saying that he wasn't actually good enough to be in the squad. There's Robbie's back now.
How he is.
So as we were just touching on there for a moment, Robbie, at the moment, Maradona has obviously just got into the national squad at 17. He was struggling to get in because he was a part of a number of good young players coming through, and the media at the time didn't really think that he was going to be good enough to get into the 1978 World Cup squad. Maradona, when he was a child, had two dreams. He wanted to play in the World Cup and he wanted to be a champion. Those were the things that he wanted to be. However, there was obviously a lot of corruption at the time in Argentina. The 1978 World Cup squad got announced and he wasn't a part of it, which was just absolutely crushing for him. A lot of the media outlets at the time reported that he just wasn't good enough. He had just lost out. However, as time has gone on and more and more people have spoken out, it was a corruption issue. The River Plate player Alonso would have been a very similar player to Maradona, who played in a very similar position. He was chosen ahead of him because the army general, who would have really have been in unofficial control of the country at the time and of the government, told the Argentinian managers and coaching staff that they wanted to pick Alonso ahead of him, simply because he was a River Plate fan. And ultimately, Maradona got wind of that, and he was absolutely devastated. And can you imagine an 18-year-old that should have went to the World Cup is cut from the squad, and he knows how good he is? It's just absolutely devastating.
Yeah, I think he's quoted as saying that was robbed. That was taken from him, wasn't it?
It was.
The 78 World Cup.
Yeah.
Because they actually had a great side, and they won it, obviously, So.
And as I was going to say, and ultimately they won it, which makes it even worse for him. Because at the time, then the media came out and says, "Oh, we didn't need Maradona. We won it without him." And he knew, well, you're not going to make me, a bit part player, or you're not going to, pretend like I'm not one of the best players in the world. And this was only an 18-year-old at the time. He was actually still only up and coming in his career. Obviously, we know what happened then with the World Youth Championships. 1979, he was chosen for that squad instead of the World Cup squad, and Maradona took that as his opportunity to show the world that he should have went to the World Cup, that when the next World Cup came around, that he was going to be absolutely unbelievable. And really in 1979 he went and he absolutely lit up the tournament, didn't he?
Yeah, big time. So basically he ended up winning the golden ball at that tournament. I think he got 6 goals. I can stand to be corrected on that in the tournament. And he was the star of the tournament. He was brilliant in the final. And, it was just amazing. Little kind of another little fact that people may not know is that he's one of only 2 players to win the youth golden ball. So the World Cup youth golden ball. He did it in 79 and 86 in the real World Cup. So the other one is Lionel Messi. He won it in 2005, and then in 2014 he won the golden ball. So for those of you that don't know what the golden ball is, it's the player of the tournament, the best player in the World Cup. So they both did it at the FIFA Under-20 World Cup, and they both did it on the grandest stage of all.
Exactly. And at the time in 79, it wasn't just known as the Youth Championship, but it was essentially the Under-20s World Cup as we know it now. So the Youth Championship doesn't make it sound as prestigious, but it certainly was for them to win that and the World Cup back to back was a massive achievement. But the fact that Maradona was part of the Youth Championships instead of the World Cup squad absolutely killed him to his core. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to touch on really the part of Maradona's career that most people remember fondly, which is the 1982 and 1986 World Cup. We'll be back to it in just a moment. Okay, welcome back to the Offside Trap podcast. So, 1982 has come around. Maradona at this stage now is most definitely in the squad. He is becoming one of the best players in the world. And as the 1982 World Cup approaches, Argentina are tipped again. They're obviously the holders. They're tipped to go far, not necessarily to win it, because they had kind of fallen. 4 years is a long time, isn't it? 4 years is a long time in football. You know, a lot of the players in 78 had kind of retired or were coming to the end of their career. And that 79 U Championship squad were starting to find their feet in the senior team. So they were kind of in a little bit of transition, but they really were tipped to get to the latter stage of the competition, maybe at least quarterfinals, semi-finals, something like that. Something that goes much further than beyond football happened in April 82, which was obviously the Falklands War between Argentina and the UK over the Falklands Islands. Ozzy Ardila spoke at length in an article that I was reading about how the Falklands War did affect our preparation. So it happened in April, and the World Cup was held then in the June. So it was really just before this club seasons were ending. You know what I mean? And they were getting into the national squads. And Ardiles basically says that they couldn't walk anywhere without reporters from all over the world saying to them, how are we going to be affected by the Falklands War? How has it affected your preparations? And what do you think of the English? And what are you going to do to the English if we play them? And everything was just focused on revenge and focused on the war. And nothing was actually focused on Argentina are the reigning champions coming into it. He said it was such a strange feeling. He said, even though we had Diego, they had a couple of other world-class players, he says nothing was actually focused on football. I can only imagine like what that's like. You know, it was an absolute disaster for them ultimately, as we obviously found out, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it showed then. They got to the World Cup, obviously different kind of format and all back then, and they got to the second round, and they ultimately just failed in the second round.
Yeah, so
I can remember Brazil was the last game, wasn't it, that they played?
It was the last game. The way it used to be functioned was that the group stage is slightly different now, but ultimately it was what they would have called our last group stage match. But it was kind of like a second round game. It was unusual, but basically, yeah, they had to play Brazil. They had to beat Brazil, to get through, and I think they had to beat them something like 3-0 as well. The way it was done, it was a goal difference type thing as well. They had to beat Brazil 3-0, and ultimately Brazil beat them well. The 1982 Brazil team would have been quite good, but they were beaten. Maradona was also sent off in the game, and he was made public enemy number one in Argentina. He was hated. He was the scapegoat. He was maybe similar to David Beckham in 1998. It was that feel of it. He was slaughtered in the media. He was, at this stage, we have to remember, he was still only, young enough. He was maybe 23, 22, 23. That's all. He was a young guy. And this was an absolute kick in the teeth for him. For someone that wanted to be a champion and wanted to play in World Cups and be a hero, this was an absolute dagger to the heart. And it ultimately led to Maradona being ousted from the Argentina squad. After the 82 World Cup, he didn't play again for Argentina until 1985. He was excommunicated by the national squad because he was held as this, no pun intended, prima donna. They thought he was better than everyone else, and that the ego carried through, and that he was only there for himself, and this sort of thing. And 85 came in, there was a new coach that came in, Bilardo came in, and he said that we're going to function, our whole team, around Maradona. 85, you're talking, he's starting to get kicking with Napoli now. He's just ended his first year with Napoli in his career, and he's starting to motor. Bilardo was absolutely slaughtered in the media by the Argentinians again, saying, how can you bring back Maradona in the run-up to the World Cup next year? You seen what happened in 82. He's only out for himself. And Bilardo had his job on the line before he had even really started.
And effectively, they probably seen him at the time as an Italian. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
He was from Naples.
Exactly. And as well as that, he went to Boca in the time with just obviously the World Cup. He then went to Barca, failed at Barca, if you want to go by what the media would have said at the time.
Damn squib, Thomas. Damn squib.
Absolutely. And now he's gone to Napoli. So, I mean, they're looking at him saying, this guy he's a waster. He's never going to fulfill it.
Maybe,
Balotelli of sorts. Someone that jumps clubs a lot, thinks he's amazing. The difference between Balotelli and Maradona is obviously absolutely, you can't even describe how big of a difference it is.
Cheers, yeah.
Exactly. But ultimately, Bilardo said, okay, to make matters worse, we're going to make Maradona the captain of the team. if you thought the media was bad at that point, after he was made captain, there were actual campaigns to get Maradona out of the squad, to strip him of the captaincy and to get rid of Bilardo. So going into the 86 World Cup, they were in turmoil again, but really only from the media. Bilardo says that the atmosphere within the squad coming up to 86 was quite calm. Obviously, the Falklands War was finished. It was still very much in their hearts, but it didn't affect them, you know. And 86, ultimately, as we're going to talk about in the next part of the show, is what most people's memories of Maradona is, really, isn't it?
Big time. And it's mad to think that that was the situation before that World Cup. Actually have some little, another nice little fact. He actually, just before the 85 and probably the callback back up, he played for Spurs in a testimonial for Ozzy Ardiles against Inter Milan. So,
best player ever
probably the highlight of most Spurs fans,
yeah,
you know, since supporting Spurs, because they haven't had much else to cheer about, you know. So that's their kind of claim to something, I suppose.
Yeah, it's the best player ever.
Certainly not titles anyway, or trophies.
Definitely not.
So, you know, that's Spurs fans. But basically, 86, incidentally, he was made captain and obviously the best player in the world.
Definitely.
You know, household name. And Jorge Valdano, one of his teammates of Argentina at the time, actually said that it was mad. It was such a pleasure to play with him. Obviously, he was a great player, and we knew that we had him. To have that confidence to go out and have someone that we knew no one else could touch Maradona. There was no one like him. But what I found interesting was, and it epitomizes Maradona as a character, was that Valdano actually said that it was great. Maradona took everything. See all that media pressure, all that. That was all on him. If the team ultimately failed, it was Maradona's fault. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's what happened in 82. Well, obviously, it came crashing down on him. And maybe, as we said, he was only a young guy at the time. This is 4 years later. I'm not sure what age he would have been. Once again, maybe 26, 27, something like that. He's in his peak now, you know, that way. And also, he's an adult. He's a real adult now, you know, and he could handle the pressure then.
And Valdano said it epitomized everything that he was. He was an inspiration, you know. He just really, really thought that he could, you know, that he'd ask the questions to the managers, to the hierarchy again, the questions that other players were afraid to, if they had gripes, anything like that. And he took everything on, the whole thing, and that was him. You know, that way he took responsibility for everything. Another thing as well, actually, before that World Cup, he, again, a little bit before his time himself, everyone always said he was a very intelligent man. Again, we wouldn't have seen that time because we just seen a madman. And basically, he had a very good friend called Fernando Signorini. Was a personal trainer that he took everywhere with him. And Signorini, again, probably ahead of his time, he was talking, specifically trained Maradona for this World Cup. It just goes to show the work rate. Some people, there was things that he used to miss training sessions and stuff like that, but he would still be training on his own when he wasn't at them sessions. And he was extremely hard working. The president of Napoli said that was a myth, that he wasn't a hard worker. He was the most hard working. They had to drag him off the pitch at times, practicing free kicks, everything, you know.
Exactly.
And him and Fernando Signorini put this plan together. And Signorini was saying the altitude and all is perfect for you, Diego. This is going to be your World Cup. And it really was.
It was, exactly. And we'll take a short break. And the next segment we'll touch on, obviously, we'll go in depth with the World Cup, especially the quarter-final with England. And then we'll briefly touch on, towards the end of his career, the 90 and 94 World Cups. And as I said, it was the bad Maradona side that we don't want to focus on. We'll be back to you in a moment. Okay, welcome back to the final part of the show. Here we are, 1986, the pinnacle of Maradona's career, captain of Argentina, heading into the World Cup. He specifically trained with a personal trainer, Signori, for this World Cup. He's been brought back into the fold. He had something to prove after 82. He is in the peak now. He's starting to hit his stride with Napoli. In 86, Napoli had finished third in the Serie A, and they were really starting to become the force that they became. But Argentina are tipped as, someone to watch out. Dark horse, best player in the world. And they really were. They were slow starters in the World Cup that year. They stuttered through, and eventually, when Maradona started to get going, they couldn't have got anyone else that would perfectly sum up the story. And they got England in the quarterfinals, which the way the draw fell. Obviously, the Falklands War was 4 years before this. As Argentinians say, if you were to put the exact same circumstances right now, okay, the World Cup that's coming up now in the next year, 2022, if you have Argentina versus England in the quarterfinals, it won't have half the significance that World Cup had, simply because they had obviously just been at war a few years previous. Maradona is the hero. He's the captain. He symbolises everything good with Argentinian football. He dodged every question in the immediate run-up to the World Cup about the Falklands because of obviously what had happened in 82 with every media questions relating to the Falklands War. He says, we don't hate the English. We just play football. Politics and football should never mix. And that was kind of the ethos throughout the entire tournament for the Argentinians. We are not mentioning that war. It already ruined one World Cup. It's not going to ruin this one. England, I don't really remember too much about the English squad. Obviously, I wasn't even born at this stage, but they would have had a relatively decent team at that time, wouldn't they, England?
Yeah, so like every England squad going into every World Cup or major tournament, European Championships, they're in the top 3 or 4 teams that you'd expect to get into the latter stages of the competition. They would have been. They would have had a very good side.
Lineker, and they had a few good players that I would obviously personally know in terms of.
John Barnes was breaking on the scene. They had a great team. They were heavy. They were strong favourites. Even in the game. And obviously, as we know, the game will be probably one of the most notorious, if not the most notorious game in the history of the World Cup.
Yeah, as we touched on in the very first part of the show, there's a few things that when you first start playing football that Maradona is one of them. And the next words out of your mouth when you say Maradona is the hand of God. It is. And as kids, if you were playing football and the ball went up in the air and you went to punch it, what was the thing you said? Maradona or hand of God. Everywhere across the world, from generation to generation, everyone knows the hand of God. What annoys me a little bit about it is that people don't talk about the next goal, which was voted the goal of the century. It epitomizes everything about Maradona that was good. The skill, the technique, the pace, the goal scoring, the strength, and the balls to do it. I'm going to show the goal now in a minute. For me, I don't know how you feel, Rob. I think it's the greatest goal of all time.
Yeah, I would actually have to be of that opinion, given the circumstance, given the stage, all that sort of thing. I can't say I've seen a better goal like that individually. There has been ones that have come very close. But I would just say that it's interesting that throughout his whole life there was Diego and there was Maradona. If there's ever a game that depicted both, it's this one.
It was this one. Absolutely. This is the greatest goal of all time.
Ahí lo tiene Maradona, lo marcan dos, pisa la pelota Maradona, arranca por la derecha el genio del fútbol mundial, y es el tercero a tocar para Borruchaga, siempre Maradona, genio, ta, ¡y gol!
It's absolutely unbelievable, and the commentary makes it 10 times better.
I was just going to say, unquestionably the greatest commentary of all time.
I haven't a clue what he's saying, but all you know is that is pure passion. He's crying and everything. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I think he says something like "Long live football." It's translated or something like that.
Absolutely brilliant.
Football,
and it's on his genius. You know, as part of obviously doing a little bit of research into this episode, I watched one of the documentaries. It was actually on the History Channel. There was nothing to do with sports or anything. It was on the History Channel. It was about Maradona. Peter Reid was on it. For anyone that watches this episode, if you even want to go back and look at the video, just show Peter Reid's number 16. Okay, he's one of the second or third people that Maradona beats, and he chases him back the entire way on the run. Okay, while he's chasing him back, Peter Reid has said on numerous occasions that he would wake up and sweat, even to this day, with a nightmare that he's chasing Maradona and he never gets there. It's only when you look at the video you can see what he's talking about. He actually matches him stride for stride the whole way, but he's about 2 yards behind him. He never drops back further or he never gets any closer. It's just they're on the same pace. But Gary Lineker said about Peter Reid's comments, he said, well, I have to say something, like it's taken him nearly 40 years to realise that he never catches him. He says we knew from the minute he started running that he wasn't going to catch him. You know what
exactly.
I mean? So,
and Lineker actually says, despite the handball for the first goal, the second goal, he's not going to lie, he actually felt like applauding him himself for the second
brilliant
goal. So,
and then Lineker did say, like, there's some English players on that pitch that day that still haven't forgiven Maradona. And Lineker says, if I was in the same position, I'd have done it myself. He says, why wouldn't you? To get to a World Cup semi-final, that's what you would have done. And he said, nothing. Yeah, thank God. Wouldn't be here talking about it if there was. But anyway, that Maradona obviously went on and won the World Cup. They went on to beat, I believe, was it Germany in the final?
Germany 3-2 in the final. And basically, it was a great final. And just a couple of things, like he had 5 goals and 5 assists in that World Cup. And they scored 14 goals. So he equated for 10 of their goals. So anyone that wants to say he won the World Cup single-handedly has a fairly strong point if they want to use that.
No pun intended, single-handedly.
Yeah, exactly. And basically there's a statue built outside the Azteca Stadium of him in Mexico, of him doing the dribble for the goal.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
that's brilliant, yeah.
They built that after that World Cup. And basically, 3-2 they won. He actually set assisted the winner in the final for the third goal. They were 2-0 up and they were pegged back, and then they got the winner.
Amazing. And obviously Maradona had achieved what he always wanted to do as a child. He wanted to play in the World Cup. He wanted to be a champion. Not only did he do that, he absolutely dominated the World Cup. He was captain and he lifted the World Cup, something that he always wanted to do. Unfortunately for Maradona, that was the peak of his career with Argentina. Yeah, so
for the next 4 years, as we said already, he was the best player in the world. Right up
dominated
to 1990.
Dominated the club scene, UEFA Cups, latest Scudettos, as we said, most valuable player in the world, best player in the world. And it all came crashing down then in 90, didn't it? I actually don't remember. I wasn't around. I don't know a hell of a lot about Argentina in 1990 because obviously Ireland were there. That'd be the highlight of our World Cup. But you can take it away. Let us know what happened in 90, Rob.
Yeah, so basically in 90, they were the world champions, obviously. Maradona was idolised in Italy. A lot of things would have been kept under wraps, so to speak, in Napoli. He was idolised by the Neapolitans. I can't even pronounce that. That's what you call them. Was doing so well with the pronunciation, wasn't it?
Just stick to the Spanish.
Now. And basically, he kind of brought a little bit on himself. He did an interview before the game and he asked everyone in Napoli.
This was the semi-final against Italy, wasn't it?
Yeah, and not. So basically, they got through that group and they met Italy in the semis. There's not too much more about that World Cup that relates to Maradona that we need to get into.
Yeah.
And Italy were seen as the favourites again. They would have had a smashing team and very passionate about their football, the Italians. Maradona's, the game goes to penalties. He's already asked the Napoli fans to support him. It's in this Stadio San Paolo, where Napoli play in Naples. And basically, he scores the winning penalty that knocks Italy out of the World Cup. And shockingly, basically signs his own death warrant on his football career as far as Italian football is concerned. He pissed off FIFA. He pissed off the Italian FA. FIFA was so corrupt it wasn't even funny, as we found out later on.
Yeah.
And basically, effectively, he got to the final, and it was one of the worst finals in the history of the World Cup. I think maybe because of the backdrop, they were actually booing him in the stadium, booing the Argentinian national anthem, the Italian fans that were in the stadium.
He was disgusted by it, yeah.
And a famous thing from him is, well, I'll say it anyway. He sons of bitches, he says, when they're booing the national anthem. You know, how disrespectful is that? You know? At the end of the day, it's a game of football. But
Bridges were born at that stage, weren't they? He was finished.
Italians are very passionate about their football. I know a good friend of his, Ciro Ferrara, played with him at Napoli, and he also was quoted as saying that he found it very hard, if he did even forgive him for knocking them out, you know?
Yeah.
And effectively then, the World Cup and kind of really his career ended with that World Cup final, which is a little bit sad. It was known as one of the worst. Germany won 1-0. And basically, after that, all the protection, there's lots of rumours about the Camorra, the Italian mafia, all this sort of thing. And,
the doping, wasn't it? 9 months after the World Cup, he tested positive for cocaine. Never played for Napoli again, was banned numerous times from that. It really was a spiral, and as I said, we're not getting into it too much, but there is that, as you say, there's a conspiracy that he says that he took cocaine Sunday to Wednesday every year he played for Napoli, and he never tested positive once during the 7 years he was there. The 9 months after knocking Italy out of the World Cup and asking the people of Naples to support him, he gave them redemption, he gave them league championships, support him, not the Italians. He tested positive for cocaine. So they reckon there is a conspiracy there. The official word, obviously, they will never, ever admit that there was any sort of conspiracy. But people close to Maradona, people close to Napoli as a club, people close to the Italian FA, all have admitted in different articles and different documentaries that he was protected, you know.
Exactly. So just to finish up on some nice things, because obviously it's a celebration of his career. They actually incidentally retired the number 10 jersey in 2000 at Napoli. So no Napoli player wears that jersey anymore.
Yeah.
It's retired.
I did touch on actually saying Hamsik was a number 10. I meant the position, the role, rather than the number.
Yeah, exactly.
Just for people that may slaughter me in the comments.
Yeah, they have actually, the first time in Argentinian football, they've kind of set up like an Argentinian FA Cup. The first game in the tournament has been played. They set it up in 2020, and a game there to get to the final was between Boca Juniors and Argentina's Juniors. Now, it's done on a group thing. It's actually named the Diego Maradona Cup, so it's named after him. And I'm not a bit unsure of the format because it's a bit unclear when I was reading up or what it is, but it's actually the first year of it. Boca Juniors actually won the game, and they're into the final of it, you know, and they play somebody else now.
Brilliant. Yeah, I must keep an eye out for that now. Yeah.
Yeah, and basically, as we said already, Napoli have named the football stadium after him, you know. So to kind of wrap things up and, you know, just kind of finish up on that, for me, I always dismissed me and my mate, actually, David Bracken, we always were in pubs and were like dismissed, you know, couldn't understand why people of his generation and seeing him live were so adamant that he was that brilliant. Watching everything, doing the research, I completely take it all back. I would put him up there. For me, Lionel Messi is still the greatest footballer of all time, but Maradona is sitting right there beside him. And it would be them two for me. I know Ronaldo and Messi have taken the game, we think, to another level. Cristiano, but for me, Maradona was a better player than Cristiano Ronaldo.
I think I'm a very similar opinion as you. Ronaldo will always be close to the top for me from his Man United roots and that, but Maradona is definitely up there for me and the greatest of all time. I find it very hard to number them 1, 2, 3. I just think that there's a nucleus of about 6 or 7 players that are the greatest ever. He's definitely up there, you know. But I just want to say, look, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks to everyone for obviously the views on the last video have been through the roof, and hopefully this one will be the same. I hope you all enjoy it. Keep subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing all the videos, and all of our followers that we've gotten on Facebook and Instagram in the last few weeks as well has been brilliant. We'll be back to you now, hopefully on the 25th with another episode. Arsene Wenger is who we're going to focus on for the next one, and I do really look forward to it. And
sorry,
go
Tom,
ahead.
there was just one thing I forgot there on the Maradona thing, and I think it's relevant not to keep us on too long, so we need people to stay and watch till the end. But the Boca Juniors as well, incidentally, did a lovely gesture. He's a box there in Boca Juniors, and they turned out all the lights in the stadium and left his light on in his box as a mark of respect to the great man. So I think that says it all, the appreciation that they had for him.
Amazing. Diego, the greatest of all time in some ways, and let's face it, he's definitely up there. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll be back to you soon. Take care.
See you now.